My name is Ken Long. I happen to be the chairperson of the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network, ASBN for short. Now, our next presenter is, do you want me to say Tony or Antonio? Tony Pisanelli from Passivhaus, Adelaide. And he'll be talking about a recent project that he's been undergoing. So please welcome Tony up to the stage.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce a project I did in Mount Barker, and it's got some interesting challenges. The site was very restrictive, and it's not one you would normally associate with a high-performance building, so I think it's worth looking at. This is more about the process than the actual building itself. So there's a big passive house, there's a lot of technical stuff, so it's probably going to send some of you to sleep. The advantage is it's only going to be for 7 minutes. So the client asked me if I could build a passive house on the site. So the first thing to look at when you're looking at a high-performance home or a passive house is the northern elevation and how much glazing you can put on that elevation and the shading. And that's very important because that's effectively the motor that drives the performance of the home. So you let in the sun in winter and you shade it in summer. So the problem with this site, it's a row housing development with northern and southern walls on the boundaries. So it has no northern windows. It only has windows to the east and west, which is basically, that's the site there, which is basically worst case scenario. So it's not your typical high performance house. And I had no idea whether I could meet the passive house standard. So we went through the process. So the good thing about passive house is that it gives you the tools to do a complete analysis and, more importantly, the ability to easily make changes so that if you haven't hit your targets, you can look at what can I do? Can I change the windows or whatever? So that's the benefit there. So with passive house, I'll just go through this quickly. There's 5 basic principles of passive house. That's the picture that everyone tends to see when they look at passive house. And these are applied to the thermal envelope, which is the external shell of the building. So these are, I don't have a clicker, but going, is that clockwise? You've got thermal insulation, you've got high performance windows, double glazing, you've got a mechanical ventilation system, you've got, the building has to be airtight, and you also have to have a thermal bridge reduced design. So that gets quite technical. So that's the site there. You can see the footprint of the building. That's the main house. You've got a garage facing a laneway. And you can see to the north and the south adjoining houses that basically join up on the party wall. And then to the reserve on the west, you've got the west elevation there. So that's the east elevation of the laneway. That's the west elevation view from the reserve. So you can see it's a row housing development, and that's the site there. So we need to be able to analyse this building and collect all the data and put it into the Passive House software. So the easiest way to do this, so the Passive House software is called the Passive House Planning Package, PHPP for short. So the easiest way to do this is to use this particular add-on in SketchUp. You create a model, it's called Design PH. You build this model, and we're only interested in the thermal envelope, the windows, and all the shading elements. So basically, the thermal envelope is in red, and all the shading elements are in white. So once we input all the relevant information, we can do a full ray tracing analysis of this building. This gives us the raw data on the building envelope and how it behaves in relation to its surroundings. So that picture there shows the model, so only the thermal envelope. I've taken out all the shading elements. The reason I'm showing you this is you can see a grey wall there, and that is called an adiabatic wall. Now, adiabatic walls occur when you have the conditioned spaces of two buildings next to each other. So the assumption is they're both going to heat and cool, so there's going to be no transfer of heat. So in that case there, because we've got party walls in the north and the south, we have two adiabatic walls, and that's very important in the calculations. So once we get all this data, once we generate it all, we can transfer all the information into the software. It's PHPP, I said before, and there's a huge amount of other information that has to go in there, but we're going to fast forward on all that. So then we can look at the verification sheet and see how we're going. So on the, I'll better look up here. In the middle there is all the criteria that has to be met. On the left is all the figures that we've got for this building. And on the right, it tells you whether you've hit the targets. So as you can see with this building, obviously it was a long process to get to this point, but we've met all our targets. And the building is suitable for Passivhaus certification as a Passivhaus in the classic category, which is the original full Passivhaus category. Now, I will add one thing. How much time have I got? 1 minute. Okay, this will take 1 minute. So I've skimmed over a lot of things here, but as you'll notice from this elevation here, you've got exposed windows on the western elevation. So in the original proposal, I had external zip track blinds to deal with the summer sun. So when my client got the cost for these, he wasn't happy about it. He said, take out the blinds. So I tried to talk him out of it and tell him how important it was. So he said to me, well, do the modelling on the two options. So model it with the blinds and without the blinds and tell me how much extra I'm going to pay for my cooling costs. So we did that, and he looked at it and says, oh, that's not that much. So I'll just run the air conditioner. So not my preferred option, but the point of this is that the client made an informed decision. It wasn't the correct decision in my opinion, but that's why we ended up with that. So thank you very much.